All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to get ready for the rest of this great day in front of us. So as we prepare for our first session this morning, I kind of want to introduce you to our panelists. The first session this morning is Setting Your Libraries Course with Community Demographics. And joining us today is data analyst Kim, and I'm probably gonna butcher your last name, Kiesewetter? She'll correct it, I'm sure. And Melissa McLimans. I'm sorry to both you, Melissa and Kim. And Melissa leads strategic planning and consulting at WiLS. And in case you're not familiar with WiLS, it's a nonprofit member organization that facilitates collaborative projects and services to save its members time and money and to advance library service. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim and Melissa to get everything set up and begin. So thank you both for volunteering to do this session.
Good morning, Sherry. How are you?
Good.
Yes.
Again, we'll apologize for any mispronunciations.
Well, we gave you a couple hard ones. So.
We totally did. So Melissa, I'm not seeing a place to share my screen. Is it showing up on your side?
Mm-mm.
Let me see if I stop my webcam. Okay. Someone made me the presenter, so I think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Okay. Okay. And are the slides showing up okay? Is it just the slides, I hope?
I can see it just now.
Okay. Okay. We'll give everyone another minute to trickle in. I'm totally a teacher, so I'll wait until 10 on the dot. I'm in North Carolina, so time change. Okay, everyone. It's weird to do a presentation where I can't see everyone, but hello. Melissa and I are going to have our cameras on for just a minute while we do basic introductions, and then we're going to turn them off. But that way you can see faces to go along with these voices behind the scenes. So welcome. We are super excited to be sharing this hour with you all. Welcome to our session. It's entitled Setting Your Libraries Course with Community Demographics. So in this session, we're going to be digging into demographic data. So what is it, where to find it, and most importantly, how to use it. So Before we jump into things, I wanted to take a brief moment to introduce both myself and my colleague, Melissa. We both work at WiLS, and we are honored and thrilled to be presenting as a part of this WLA conference event. So my name is Kim Kiesewetter, Miss K. I'll answer to pretty much anything. And I joined WiLS in 2020 as their new data analyst, where I get to work on a variety of research and data projects with libraries across Wisconsin for a living, which I feel super fortunate to get to do. So I'm going to pass the baton to Melissa really quickly to introduce herself, and then we'll jump into the session.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa McLimans, and I've been a community liaison at WiLS for about 5 years now. Work at WiLS is project-based, but most of mine has fallen in the consulting services area. And most of that consulting has taken the form of strategic planning with public libraries and library systems. So at WiLS, we rely on two main principles in strategic planning. And the first is that the community should be at the heart of every plan and its process, and that data should help each library make well-informed decisions. And we really think that demographics tick both of those boxes.
Thanks, Melissa. So we're going to shut our cameras off now. And let me do that while I'm thinking about it. And we're going to jump into things. So I'm going to take the lead on roughly the first half of the presentation. And then Melissa is going to share some case studies with you all to really tie everything back together. So to situate our time together during the next hour, we're first going to review what demographics are and how this information can be found and used in support of understanding your community and to complement making strategic decisions. Second, we're going to identify different free and open census information sources and how to navigate them. And three, we're going to show a few real-world examples of using demographics at your library. So we'll hold back roughly the final 10 minutes of our hour for Q&A, but absolutely feel free to send questions in the chat. In the meantime, we'll try and pause and check those as we go along. So let's dive in. So the first place we want to look is, what is demographic data? We're going to start with the super basics. Demographic information includes data on items that you probably envision when you hear the word demographics, things like race and ethnicity, age, gender, things of that nature. It also encompasses a bunch of other data points that can be really useful, and we're going to talk some about those as well. Things like educational level, income level, use of food assistance or reduced cost lunch programs, transportation and commute patterns, homeownership rates. I could keep going and I won't. Needless to say, there is a lot of different information that can have different implications for making decisions at a place like a library. Community demographic data provides really valuable information on the people that local institutions like libraries are serving and can inform a variety of organizational practices and considerations. So for community organizations, this can include everything from resource allocation, what to purchase, to what types of programs you might want to offer to encourage community members' engagement with your organization and things of that nature. In addition, trends in demographic information can also be useful in understanding the ways a community might be changing so that you can adjust accordingly at the organizational level to stay dynamic and serving the entire community. And as an aside, I know this is particularly on a lot of our minds with unknowns related to the COVID-19 pandemic that we've all been wrestling with in this wonderful year that is 2020. So why use demographic data? I know you're already really busy, and here I am suggesting something else that you might want to be doing. So above all else, demographic data is a story. I'm a huge proponent of the idea that data really is a story about whatever it is that we're looking at. So in this case, demographic data is a story about your community. So what does your community look like on a macro, big picture level? Who's living here? What kind of employment opportunities do people have? What kind of resources and challenges might exist for members of your community? All of these are questions, and of course, many, many more that can be examined through demographic data. So familiarizing yourself with demographic information as an organization like a library can help create this foundation for strategic decision making by helping to highlight the intersection between your community and your organization. You can't have a library without community members who are coming and being engaged with your institution. Demographics can be used to support decisions ranging from, as I mentioned, resource allocation to providing a framework for thinking about things like equity and inclusiveness, which is something that I think is also at the forefront of a lot of our minds in 2020. In addition, demographics can really help contextualize other data that you might be gathering. So if you put out a community survey, for example, are the results from your survey representative of the larger community, or could you potentially be missing critical voices? Is there a certain sector of your community that's overrepresented in responding to this survey? Similarly, if you are planning focus groups or community conversations to learn more about needs in your community, demographics can really help you think about who do we want to include here? Who are important people's voices that we need to have a part of this process so that it is representative and inclusive of the community. One thing that I want to highlight before we really jump into things is that demographics can highlight both strengths and challenges for your community. So it is not unusual when you're looking at demographic information to see something like, for example, a higher than average unemployment rate. And this can feel almost like a critique or criticism of your community, right? Or like, this is my town. This doesn't look good. However, this data is not meant to be viewed as a critique. Instead, it really is a tool that can be extremely helpful and valuable to know and understand in decision making. So knowledge of different dynamics that might be going on in your community can be a really excellent starting point for being proactive in decision making. So as a community-oriented organization, libraries can provide really valuable services to help support community challenges, both as a singular entity through library service provision, but also through collaborative community partnerships that you might have with schools or nonprofits or, government entities and things of that nature. So where can demographic data be found? We're going to start at the national level, but we'll drill down a little bit. National level demographic information is collected by the US government through census efforts, which I'm assuming many, if not all of you, are familiar with. So this makes this data what's known in the research world as an existing data source. So this is just a way of saying that it's data that someone else has collected, organized, and published for other people to use. When it comes to census data, this includes the actual census, which is done every 10 years. You probably just got harassed to complete one, as well as other endeavors that go through the Census Bureau, like the American Community Survey and American Housing Survey. All of that data is integrated and lives on the US Census Bureau's website. Excuse me. So the process for gathering this data, census data, is super extensive, expensive, well-developed, making it a really super reliable source of data. So you may also be able to find a variety of state and local sources that disseminate additional demographic data. And also, don't forget that your institution may collect some of its own. So for example, WiLS data might include some basic demographic information, or you might have conducted a survey that collected some from participants. And all of these different sources of demographic data can sort of nest inside of each other to create a really holistic picture of what your community looks like, what your patrons look like, and some of the different dynamics that are going on there. So I'm going to take a few minutes to highlight a few different demographic sources, and then Melissa and I are going to spend some time tying it all together by providing examples of ways that you are able to potentially integrate demographics into your work. So I want to acknowledge first, hopefully obviously, that this is by no means an exhaustive list of places where you can play with either some or all of the census data. Instead, this is a starting point of currently free options that you can use to find a variety of different demographic data points. And these are ones that both Melissa and I have used through the course of our work and feel like have some really good data above all else, but also some ways to make it friendlier to navigate. So there's a number of national level census data sites that are either free or have a cost associated with them. So we've provided 2 free options here that we feel are pretty strong. One is the US Census's data site, which is always free and open to the public. It does have some what's known as dashboard functionality, which means that it displays the data in easier to visualize formats other than just C's and tables of numbers. But it kind of breaks down after the county level, so it may not exist for, say, your census tract or city. The second one is a proprietary website that's been built out in part by Deloitte, and it's called Data USA, and it's an open source data project that integrates census data with other national level data sets. And a number of different data people and organizations publish data workbooks essentially on there that you can play around with. And we're going to show you both of these sites. The last option that we wanted to highlight in this presentation is for Wisconsin specific information. GetFacts is a free and open site. It's housed by the Applied Population Lab, and it includes basic charts and graphs as well. It's important to note here that if you decide to use demographics for planning purposes, you may need to look in more than one place to find the data you're looking for. Depending on what the information is that you want and need and what format you want it in, you may find that you need to look a couple different places in order to get the information that you want, which is why we wanted to highlight a few different places to get you started. As mentioned, we're only covering a few sources of demographic information, but there's more data out there that can help you better understand your community. So some of it might be on other federal and state websites like the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Department of Public Instruction for Wisconsin has an information system for education data dashboard with statistics about Wisconsin public schools that might be of interest as another example. And other data may not be publicly or freely available, but it may be available to you through partnerships, community connections, and things like that. So for purposes of our brief time together, I'm going to walk through a couple of these sites just so you can see what they look like and how to navigate them so that it feels a little bit more familiar to you. I know this is not an interactive setup at all. And I know many of you are probably working and doing 50 million other things, homeschooling your kids, answering patron phone calls, etc. But if you are sitting here, I always like to offer when I do a presentation the opportunity to make it a little more interactive. So as much as I love hearing myself talk, I want to make the next little portion interactive for those who are interested in playing along with me. So this is an activity that we call at WiLS the Community Demographics Assessment. I've adapted it down. It's an activity that's just for fun. There's no pressure to have the right answer or to share anything out with anyone. Instead, it's a chance to really highlight the differences that we might have of perceptions of a community and the actual numbers. And of course, the actual numbers can change from year to year. So the way that it works is you think about your community. I, as mentioned at the beginning, actually don't live in Wisconsin. I live in North Carolina. So the town that I live in is Hillsborough, and I actually have never done any research or data work here. So I did this activity myself. So these are my guesses on our population size, the median age, the median income, and the poverty rate. So I want to give you all a minute if you want to play along, if you have a scrap piece of paper or a good brain to just think about your community or your library's community and think, okay, what would you guess if you don't already know your population size, your median age, your median income, and your poverty rates might be? So I'll give you guys just a moment if you want to play along. And then when I pull up these sites to walk through them, you can either just watch me look up my own answers, or you're welcome to play along and look at your own city or town. So while you all are doing that, I'm gonna pull up data.gov. So this website is data.census.gov. And this is the United States Census Bureau's data website that they've been updating probably for the last year or two now at this point in time. So the way that this site works is you just go to the search box here and you type in the place that you want to look at. It could be a census tract, it could be a city, town, village, it could be a county, and then it will take you to the next page. So my town is Hillsborough, and I already know that there's multiple places named Hillsborough, counties, etc. You'll see that it pulls up Hillsborough County, Florida first. So I'm going to type in town because I know it's a town, and you'll see that it pulls it up on the list. So if you're living somewhere and you're looking up the name of your town or county, there may be other places with that name. So you may have to write down village, town, city, county if you're having difficulty finding it. When you click on it, it will either take you to the page's dashboard, or if it's too small and the US Census hasn't done it yet, it will look exactly like Hillsborough. So I can actually show you really quickly. Oshkosh, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, I know has a dashboard. So if you're lucky enough to live somewhere a little bit bigger, your city, town, or county might have, some basic dashboard functionality where it turns the information into charts for you. But don't panic. Even if it doesn't, there's very, very valuable information on here. So I'm going to pull that back up. So when you are on your site, which of course my internet is now going very, very slow. I'm going to close out of this. So when you go to your site, you can just click any of these tables. If there is no dashboard functionality, you will have a sea of numbers, but it's pretty straightforward to find. You can also download these as Excel files, and if you are familiar with Excel, you can create pivot tables and charts really easily in order to turn your data into something that's a little easier to work with. So looking here, I can see that the total population in Hillsborough is 7,000. So I was off, I guess, 10,000. So that is the basics of this website here. Sorry, I'm having to move the GoToWebinar dashboard so I can click things. So at the top where it says product, this is where you can see where the data is coming from, and you can actually switch to another year if you wanted to look back over time. And when you click this customize table button in US Census Bureau site, you're also able here to adapt your data and ultimately download it as a CSV or Excel file for further analysis here. The next site that I want to show you is datausa.io. So it's data, DATAUSA.io. So not .com or anything like that. So it looks like this. And this website is snazzy. It's much more slick than the US Census one. And it currently, as I mentioned, is free and open. Of course, you always run the risk with proprietary websites of that changing. So you can similarly in the search box, just type in your town. And from my experience, I have yet to find anything that doesn't have a dashboard functionality on Data USA. I think everything looks comparable to what you are seeing on the screen right now. So this is pulling from census information. So you'll see it has the same numbers here, but it's a little bit more visually friendly. I can find the median age really quickly. It's 38.7. The poverty rate is 13%, your median household income, and it also shows you growth here. As you scroll down on the Data USA website, they are constantly updating information. One thing that I want to highlight on here that's different from the data site that the census houses, it's that it also pulls in automatically state data. So you want to be really careful when you're looking at data on this website. So for example, their COVID data, it doesn't go down any further or any more granular than the state level. So this data is not for just Hillsborough, it's for the entire state. Once you get through the political things that they added there, you can find information that is unique to the community. So race and ethnicity. There's also information on foreign-born populations and things of that nature. And this data also, you can view where it comes from by clicking on view data, and it will pull up the raw data set. So you can also download that and use it in Excel if that's something that you are interested in being able to do. You can also save the charts for a presentation, things of that nature. So there's a lot of different pieces of information that you could look at here. The last option that I want to show you all is Get Facts. And this is the one that I mentioned is through the Applied Population Lab. So for this one, to look at data, you click on the Data Viewer tab, and you'll see right now that it's showing data for all of Wisconsin. So there's charts on age, sex, age pyramids, language, race and ethnicity, etc. You can look at the data tables once again. You can save the charts, you can download the charts and use them, etc. And if you want to change the location in what you're looking at, up on the left-hand side, there is a place where you are able to either look at the state, the county, or the county's subdivision. And you would just type that into the box. I think that I will just randomly look up something, generate a new profile, and it's now showing me the city of Oshkosh in Winnebago County. So that is another free option with data that you can play with there as well. Let me get back over to my PowerPoint. So with that in mind, I am going to pass the baton to my colleague, Melissa. Let me pull back up our slide deck and let her share some of the implications for how we can use this data in actual decision making that might be an inspiration to you as a library.
Thanks, Kim. So in this next section, Kim is actually going to be driving and I'm going to be doing my my talking. So Kim, if at any point I get apart from the slides, don't hesitate to just remind me. I'm in the place. So right, so now what we want to do is now that we have an overview of how and where to find demographics, we're going to do a little hands-on work and think about ways you might use the information to guide decisions at your own library. We've tried to come up with some very realistic examples. And in fact, our first scenario comes from my planning experience from a few years ago with Menomonee Falls Public Library. So Menomonee Falls, which is the most populous village in Wisconsin for you trivia folks out there, began to see some changes in their community. Several assisted living facilities had been built, school enrollments had decreased, and the library patrons seem to be getting a little older. So with this anecdotal and observational evidence in mind, the library looked at the demographics in their community and how they've changed in the past 10 years. There are a couple of ways to get a look at age breakdown in your community. For a snapshot, it's really easy to go to Get Facts or Data USA in just a click. So we're going to do this in Get Facts and take a look. So Kim's in that selected profile. She's going to start typing in Menomonee Falls. Here it is. And you can then also select the type of profile and drill down. So what we're interested in here is the population. So, right, perfect. What we want to do is kind of scroll down just a touch and take a look at age group by age group. I think we might have passed the one chart I wanted to take a look at. If you can go up just a little bit, Kim. It's at the top. Am I missing what I wanted?
I'm unmuting myself. It looks like they have the age composition, median age by county, by sex, age pyramid.
Okay, I'm sorry to do this to you, but so basically what you can see here, we'll just go ahead, but one of the facts is that they do have quite a large older population. And you can see that in this comparison of age composition, Menominee Falls, in fact, has a larger percentage of 65-year-olds and over in their village versus the county and the state. But 2010 is getting a little bit old at this point. The new census will be coming out soon, but if you do want to get a better glimpse and more recent data, you can go an extra step and go ahead and take a look at the American Community Survey. So we're going to pop on over to the census, and you can search then for Menominee Falls. I had to pick one that was hard for North Carolina friend to type, by the way.
Thank you, Melissa.
So this is a little bit of a different chart than what I had had in mind. So I'm sorry about this a little bit, but you can see that Kim, can you get to a chart that shows the age breakdown, the actual data table? Is there a non-data dashboard version of this? That's just the charts that you can get to.
I can go here. I can't. Sorry.
Okay, you know, don't worry about it. You're going to all have to take my word for it, but I did math, and we're not going to do math on screen because that's actually something terrible to have you watch me do. But I wanted to see if this trend continued, the aging of the community into the more recent years. And in 2017, 55-plus-year-olds made up 34.6% of their residents. And in 2018, it was 35.2%. So indeed, they did keep seeing this trend of the aging population. So in response to that demographic shift, the library was able to adopt some actions to better serve their community. They decided to do more outreach and assessment to understand the needs and interests of the older adult population. And that included everything from active retirees to folks with limited mobility. They worked to implement a library memory project with partner libraries. They sought to strengthen partnerships with other agencies, organizations, businesses that support that population. They decided they would advocate for services, not just in the library, but in the community, using the demographic numbers to make the case. And they developed opportunities for home delivery patrons to participate in library reading programs. So the library was able to focus on partnerships, services, and programming using demographic information. Being able to really know your community makeup can help a library make decisions about staffing, resources, signage, and even marketing. Having a clear picture can also help the library make a case for resources or a change to stakeholders. So we're going to take a look now at Green Bay, go Packers, on Get Back. So what we want to do here is type in Green Bay again. And then for select profile at the top, we have the city for sure here.
Okay.
Perfect. And then select profile at the top, Kim. Yep. And race and ethnicity is going to get us the information that we're going to follow along with. Perfect. So taking a look at this very first chart, you can see that Green Bay is a pretty diverse city in terms of race and ethnicity, with about 70% of the population white and about 15% of the population Hispanic or Latino. So if we go down a little bit, in particular, we'll see that the city has seen a fairly big increase in the Hispanic and Latino residents. So there should be a population over time right there. Perfect. And you can see that jump. What we're looking at here are 3 different glimpses of the data at this data point. So you have the 2000 census, you have the 2010 census, and the most recent 2018 American Community Survey data. So you can see between 2000 to 2010, there's a fairly significant increase in that population that also then continued into the ACS. Now, if we scroll down just a bit more on here, we're going to take a look at language spoken at home. So in Green Bay, about 18% of the households speak a language other than English in the home. And that's a different number than between the state and the county. So there is a change there. And we can drill down even a little bit further here. We're going to take a look right past this one at languages spoken at home. And this tells us what languages then are being spoken in the home, if not English. So of that 18% that speak something other than English, about 70% speak Spanish in the home. So we know that there's a significant Spanish-speaking population in Green Bay. Now that the library knows this, it might do things like, we can move back to the presentation, purchase Spanish language newspapers, maybe even those from the home countries that some of the folks are coming from. I do want to point out that more research, of course, is necessary to learn what to purchase. The census is pointing us in a direction, but a library may need to do more information seeking to match the needs of the community more precisely. A library might prioritize hiring Spanish-speaking staff. It might connect with leaders from the Latinx community to build relationships and understanding. The library might develop a clear understanding of community needs and then develop programming around those needs. They might increase Spanish language books, movies, other materials. They might find ways to bring the library to where the community is, or create signage in Spanish, or develop marketing specifically for this community group. So I do want to point out that a significant increase is important, but even a steady increase or a small but significant number of community members that speak a language other than English may be reason enough to put in place some of these changes. But some communities are seeing significant changes and may need to prioritize some services differently than other communities. So now we're going to take this example just a little bit further and kind of think about future scenario planning and just being prepared. So the last two examples are very rooted in what we know. This next one is moving from that real world to something that's a little bit more hypothetical. So bear with us as we work through this scenario. And we're going to try to incorporate some of the things that we know about the pandemic. So according to the CDC, meat and poultry processing facilities face distinctive challenges in the control of infectious diseases, including coronavirus. So in Wisconsin, some of the early outbreaks took place in communities where the meatpacking industry represented a significant amount of jobs. So we're going to take a look at Green Bay again, but this time we're going to look in Data USA. Yep, perfect. So if you click on the economy little icon there, it will take us down. You can kind of jump around, and there's lots of great information here from obviously income levels, wages, there's some unemployment information, there's things that break down about wage by gender, which is super fascinating. What we're going to take a look at just really quickly is the occupations, I think is the section that we want to take a look at. There we go. So looking at occupations, Green Bay has about 13.5% of their jobs are in production occupations. And in fact, if you look under most specialized, it says compared to other places, Green Bay has an unusually high number of residents working in production occupations. So why does that matter? Production jobs include slaughterhouses, meat packing, things of that nature. And you might not know that without a quick trip to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I'm just plugging that because it's another great useful source of information. So further, the CDC has noted that targeted workplace interventions and prevention efforts that are appropriately tailored to the groups most affected by COVID-19 are critical to reducing COVID-19 associated occupational risk, as well as the health disparities among vulnerable populations. It can help prevent community spread, essentially. So, and Kim, we can head back to the presentation when you have a sec. Knowing what we know about COVID-19 pathways and the demographics of Green Bay, the community and the library could use this data to be prepared in the future for other waves of this virus or another virus like it. That might mean building partnerships in the community to provide resources for members of the community. It might mean having critical information about health, about testing, about workers' rights available. And since 13% of the population speaks Spanish in the home, it might mean having that information in another language. It also might mean having policies and procedures ready to go if health changes start to appear in the city. And so we use production occupations as one example, but maybe a city or your municipality actually has a large service industry with some hotels and restaurants or leisure activities that the economy depends on. So the library might be prepared to offer support should large-scale shutdowns occur. Maybe having an active partnership with the job center or unemployment training that's just ready to go. So knowing industries in and around a community can help libraries understand the needs and service gaps in the community. And it might point out relationships and partnerships that the library could cultivate in response. So when considering ways to make a library an inclusive environment to serve the local community, demographic data can provide a foundation for considering the ways library leadership and staff are similar or different from surrounding community. This is valuable in ensuring diverse voices are involved in decision-making for the library. So let's focus on the library board for just a minute. Here's a quote from a board member in an article entitled, "If Your Board Looked Like Your Community," which was written specifically about a community arts board, and I've changed one word to frame it for libraries. So here's the quote. "Our job as the board is to expand the network of the library, who attends programs and uses resources and who financially supports us. Collectively, a more diverse board has a wider network of resources to bring to organization. Our secondary role as the board is to participate in committee work, and having diverse points of view at the table helps us make better decisions." So policy changes, resource allocation, and more have a pathway through the library board. A director may want to make a change, for example, investing in translation services and new signage, but the board will need to understand why the change is necessary and how it meets the needs of the community. Board members that have diverse backgrounds or match demographics in the community will bring a deeper understanding of community needs and issues. So here's an example also from my past planning experience. Wauwatosa is predominantly white, and we're just going to stay on the screen. We're not going to do any more searching, but it's roughly 84% white. The median income is higher than the rest of the county, but wealth is concentrated in certain census tracts. And a look at the census shows that about 16% of children under the age of 18 live in a household with a single parent. So that's just a quick demographic kind of snapshot of some key information about Wauwatosa. So I had the opportunity to work with Wauwatosa on planning, and the board president at the time was working to improve board diversity. And he was looking at things like gender, race and ethnicity, family makeup, income, age, and where people lived. He knew the board wasn't as representative as it could be, and he put work into changing that. So I'm actually stealing a few of his ideas here because they were inspiring to me. So knowing about community demographics, the board can work to make sure it increases its representation and decreases possible barriers to participation. So here's some examples how you might use that information. You might ask to speak about the library board and trustees' roles at community meetings that are attended by a variety of community members. You might reach out strategically to community leaders that represent different segments of the population. Maybe write about the library and the library board for other community publications that reach segments of the community that the library communications might miss. There's the DPI Inclusiveness Toolkit that could be used. When a board seat opens, prioritize or advocate to fill with a community member from an underrepresented group. And for those single parent households, the board might examine when and how they meet in order to decrease barriers to participation. And these actions could also be used by library leadership to make sure that the staff, that programming and collections and more are also reflective of the community, from taking part in community events the library is not normally part of, to prioritizing hiring from underrepresented groups. So there are lots and lots of ways that you might use demographics in your library, from determining marketing and communication practices to thinking about when to offer programs. I know that just recently we've been working with the Wisconsin Libraries Transforming Communities cohort, and they were using demographics to make sure that they're not missing voices as they do their community engagement work. So that was just a few very real world examples, and this chart kind of just points out some other possible demographic data points and how you might use it in a more in a broader sort of way. So for example, if you take a look at unemployment, that and I think at some places in the census, and Kim, you can always jump in if I'm making things up, but you can actually understand sometimes some of these things even broken down by age groups to get more precise information. But with unemployment, then that might guide your local partnerships, obviously with job centers, or it might give the library ideas for programs related to refreshing your job skills or giving resume help. So transportation is also kind of an interesting one that is worth looking at, I think. So you can find out with transportation if you have a lot of bus riders, and that can help you maybe make some decisions about marketing or hours of operation even. So maybe they align with transportation hours. And you can find out if people are commuters. So if they are in the car for a long time, that might mean that you should think about investing in a robust audiobook collection. So with that, I'm going to pause, take a drink of water, and find out if you have any questions. And we'd also love to hear or see in chat, I guess, if you use demographics at your library and how.
Yes, so I'm looking at the chat box. I also don't think I have the ability to see who's in here. Melissa, are you seeing anything in the chat box? It's just empty for me.
No,
Which may mean, okay, I was just making sure I was looking at the right thing. We'll give it a couple more minutes in case anybody wants to drop anything in the chat, but I'm kind of worried. It says I'm only looking at organizers and panelists, so I don't know if there's a way to change this in case anyone's sending questions.
Yeah, or if there's any in the WLA office that is able to share questions if we can't see them.
Yeah. Okay, well, I still I don't see anything in the chat, which totally great if no one had any questions. If you are sending questions, I apologize. In our chat box, it doesn't show anything. And I can't see the list of participants, so I don't know what's going on. But yeah. Hey, well, with that in mind, do we want to, what?
Sherry just popped in. I'm just curious if she has some help for us here.
Yeah, I don't have any questions because I am with you and I can't see access to the general chat either. So
Okay.
I just wanted to let you know that we're in the same boat.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't not looking at the right thing, but I was like, I can only see organizers and panelists, so thank you. Is there anyone at the WLA office who's able to see if any of the participants ask questions? Because it looks like we're only enabled to see organizers and panelists chat, just as a heads up if anybody's on here.
There are currently not any questions.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, if there's not any questions and we've given it a couple of minutes, then just thank you all so much for your time. Melissa and I feel very honored to have been able to present with you all and share a little bit about the work that.
Sorry, there's a few. There's quite a few that have said thank you, and then someone's asked if you've used NCIS, NCES data.
Yes, we have, and that was actually one of the National Center for Education Statistics, I think is what NCES stands for. But yeah, that's another great place to look at specifically education data for things around literacy, test scores, things like that for public schools and educational entities. And I think you can look all the way down to, like actual school level data. So that is a great resource and suggestion as well.
Right, and that could guide some service decisions or partnerships in your community. If there's something going on with test scores, maybe you can partner up with the public schools to support the high schoolers that are taking those tests, or the 8th graders, or whoever it is that might be struggling, just as an example.
Thank you so much for whoever's WLA office for reading that to us.
There's a few more if you have.
Yes.
And when is demographic data too old? If you've answered some of these, I'm so sorry. I didn't see these questions before.
You're totally fine. So demographic information is a little bit tricky. That's a great question, by the way, in that the census, which is the best, freshest data, comes once every 10 years. That being said, the data.gov website that the census puts out, as well as Data USA and GetFacts too, all do a good job of integrating things like the ACS survey, which is done every 5 years, I believe, and some of the other national level data sites to really integrate it in. So as long as you're aware of the year of the data that you're pulling, you should be good. And that actually reminds me of something, so thank you whoever asked that, which is if you are pulling demographic data from multiple sites, you always want to, and I will just pull this up actually, since we have a minute, you always want to look at, just for example here, if you're looking at 2018 data for occupations, if you looked up on another site the poverty rate, you want to make sure it's for the same year. Otherwise, you might not be making apples to apples comparison. So all of these websites should be able to give you data from around the same time point, but you might just need to double check that the settings are such that it's not like 2010 on one site and you're comparing it to something from 2018 on another site, because yes, at that point that comparison might break down a little bit.
We've had quite a few people say thank you, that it was very informative. Another attendee shared that they used census data in the early 2000s to prove a local need for Spanish language collection, and they freed up funds to buy materials.
Perfect. That's a great example.
Another said they use demographics for grant applications.
Yes, which is a really, really good point too, from not just internal purposes, but from looking for monies elsewhere. Sometimes having demographic information is a really important, if not required, component.
And then another attendee said that they love your idea of partnerships, and it seems as though the library might take a role in helping a community at large gain a better understanding of their community makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of note in relation to that, just one thing that Melissa and I and some of the other WiLS staff noticed when we were looking at the IMLS CARES grants that came out for libraries is that a lot of those were partnership oriented, not hilariously, but interestingly focused on Wi-Fi provision, which some of you may be wrestling with at your libraries. And that's an area where demographic information, looking at, Wi-Fi coverage that people have, schools sharing their needs, where there's a clear partnership element that could be going on. This was related to COVID, if I didn't say that. Sometimes when I start talking without notes, I'm like, did I leave that out?
Well, that answers all of the questions in the chat right now. Some people asked if the slides will be shared and the recording will be on the WLA website after today as well.
Yes. I mean, I think so.
Yes.
Is it going up there? Okay.
That sounded like a question. But unless there are any other questions that pop in the last few minutes, I think that wraps this up really nicely. Thank you both. This was very helpful and informative. The next session in this channel is going to be the session 2A, which is rebuilding rebuilding institutional knowledge. And then the other two sessions, 2B and 2C, you can find the links for those in the PDF that you all received in an email last night. Okay. So Kim or Melissa, if you're still there, another question did pop in.
I'm here, so I can answer it.
So they asked, what types of marketing would you use to reach bus riders?
Bus riders, well, it would have to be if you could get, sometimes there's signage in the bus that you can purchase. So that would be one idea. I don't know the details exactly of how one would go about doing that. It would just be something to explore. For marketing, I think it's really helpful to break down in the community too, since we know that different age groups get their information in different ways, especially library users.